everywhere. Scenes that we once knew, and they all just recall memories of you.
I'm Arant, and I'm going to attempt to tell this family history in broken pieces, I'm sure. But to start with, I want to show my daddy's home. Now shut up. My dad's home. That was one of the first houses in Pageland. This was before the turn of the century, I'm sure. And this was located on South North Pearl Street. Okay, that's the home.
Bible says to honor your father and your mama. They the one what birthed you. It don't say nothing about honoring your father if he don't drink whiskey, or honor your father if he ain't done left. It says honor your father and your mama. They the one what birthed you.
This is my dad and my mother. But my daddy was the only son, Henry Barry Sowell, and he had 6 sisters. When he married my mother, Jesse Blakeney, it was one night in August during a revival meeting at the Baptist church. After the meeting, my mother and daddy eloped and got married, and of course that made her mother very angry. And this is Anna Blakeney, my grandmother, who is responsible for the Blakeney Hotel that we'll be hearing a lot about later. So, my family is a big family, 12 children. And my dad always said he wanted a baker's dozen. So here we are. I could name them one by one, and I guess I should, because we have Stella, who was born in 1902, Leo, October 24th, 1904, then Henry Barry Jr., June the 24th, 1906, William Richard, February the 20th, 1908, Mary Elsie, February 5th, 1910, Kathleen Evans, May the 30th, 1912, Willie Pearl, December the 3rd, 1914, Lemuel Lewis, July the 25th, 1917, Nellie Christine, July the 5th, 1919, Reese Eugene, March the 14th, 1922, John Wilson, February the 14th, 1924, Rachel Adair, May in 1926. That was our family. Another picture, a little bit later, is this. You probably know it. Some of them have been married now, and this is another picture of the Sowell family. But here we have the in-laws, some of them. Stella, Leo, H.B., Adele, his wife, Richard, Maybelle, Elsie Graham, and Frank Graham. Reese, Kathleen, Betty, Reese's wife, and Bob Huey, Duck's wife. Nellie, beg your pardon, that's Pearl. I didn't recognize myself. I'm a little bit grayer now. And John Amos, Louis, and Betty, that Louis met in Montana during the war, and we love her dearly. Nellie and Ashton Andre in Tampa, Florida. John Sowell, Rachel, and Bill Caraway, who lives in Pageland. This home was in Pageland, our Sowell home, Jesse and Henry Sowell, and I'm sure the child on the porch was Stella and Leo standing, HB and Pete in Daddy's arms. So that was early on. So
lock up my old toolbox and hide all my fishing gear, 'cause my in-laws are outlaws, but they ain't wanted here.
Was in Pageland, our Sowell home, Jesse and Henry Sowell, and I'm sure the child on the porch was Stella and Leo standing, HB and Pete in Daddy's arms. So that was early on. So let's switch again now to the Arant family. This is P.M. Arant, my husband's father, and their home place out at Five Forks Community. The family, left to right, Laura Blakeney, Laura Belk, Mama Lottie, Millard, and Alpha were twins. John Amos Arant, Paul is standing, and Bill Arant, and Mr. Pete. And Mr. Pete was one of the largest men in Chesterfield County, and he seemed to be happy to brag about that. He walked down the street covering half the sidewalk, and he said he weighed 350 pounds, and he didn't care who knew it. So that was his downfall, I think. He died early.
How else can I tell you? What more can I do? Why don't you believe me?
Early on in my life, I must tell you that I was Miss Pageland, whether you believe it or not. But that was during the time that the residence that we've lived in all these years on McGregor and Hickory Street was being built. Now, my husband's granddaddy, John Alexandra Arant, was a very prosperous and popular man in Pageland. He owned half of Pageland, and the Sowells, I think, owned about the other half. But anyway, he built several homes, and he was getting on in age and became sick and thought he was going to die. So he was in the hospital in Monroe, and he met this beautiful nurse that she just thought that would be a wonderful catch for her, because the old man's going to die pretty soon. So he became engaged to her, and they were getting along pretty well, and he decided to build a home for her. And about the time it was completed and they were getting very serious, she told him that she wanted him to will everything he owned over to her at that time. Well, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. That was absolutely unheard of. So he was man enough to tell her, I'm sorry, but I have lots of grandchildren, and some that I am especially fond of. And so that was John Amos, evidently his favorite one, was named for it. So as I walked to high school in about, I guess about in the 30s, early 30s, I would pass by this site where I am right now and watch the building being built. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I would one day live there. But as it happened, John Amos and I were married on my birthday, December the 3rd, 1935. And that was when Mr. John gave this house to his favorite grandson. Of course, he had to do a little business to settle up with the others later. But anyway, we are the only ones that lived in this house. And if you can imagine, during the Depression time, a young couple got married and moved right into a solid brick building was just really something unheard of. And needless to say that words cannot express our appreciation for such a wonderful wedding gift.
But it makes a good story. And
Ain't it good to be a brave girl too?
I'll tell you a story, one among many that I can relate to you, but this was when I was in the 5th grade in school. The classroom happened to be on the ground floor. I could look across the road and there was our house not too far from school. Well, I looked out one day and I saw a huge smoke. It scared me so bad. I just didn't say a word to the teacher or anybody. I jumped out that window and ran home as fast as I could go. When I got there, the first thing I did was go in the house. I realized it wasn't the house, it was the barn, but I was so excited I ran in and picked up my baby sister Rachel, who was sleeping beautifully and peacefully in her crib. I also went to the living room and picked up my little precious violin that my grandmother Sowell had given me. Okay, come to find out, the two little boys, Reese and John, must have been about 4 and 5 or 6 years old, had slipped in the barn and was doing their thing by lighting matches. Big box of matches. They were striking matches. Well, this happened tonight with the hay and everything that was in the barn, and also with my sister's bunch of white rats, mice with pink eyes. I'll never forget them. But they were destroyed. Not only that, it caught the bales of cotton that my dad had worked hard and was certainly going to use that for the family's welfare that winter. But it was all destroyed. You can imagine what was going on. Well, my dad was so glad that the boys were not burned that he got them down and talked to them and said, I'm not going to punish you this time, but I'm going to tell you, child, if this ever happens again, you will remember it in a long, long time. So everything was all right. Well, must not have been 2 weeks later. They again crawled up under the house doing their thing, striking matches. Well, you can imagine what happened when my daddy caught them. When he got through with them, they weren't able to sit down in about 2 weeks, I think. He just picked them up by their little overall straps and blistered their little bottoms. And that was the end of that. They never played with matches again.
Well, I keep on thinking about you, sister, golden hair surprise.
I want to tell you a story about my beautiful sister, Leo. She absolutely was a beauty. She had long black curly hair that she rolled the curls around her finger, and they were just beautiful. When she walked, they'd just bounce just like a ball. Anyway, we had a new Methodist preacher come into town. And of course, being a religious family as we were, my dad and mother, a big part of the church and its growth, was this young man came, and he kind of took a liking to Leo, so he came over to visit. And when he drove up in the driveway, our humble little home had an upstairs to it. And my sister Kathleen, we nicknamed her Duck, was sitting in the window. So the preacher happened to look up and he said, well, who is this upstairs? And as mischievous as I was, I said, that's one we don't talk about. That's my sister, we don't let her come down. Well, she came down, and I'll tell you, we had a hair-pulling time, and I never did play that joke on her. Believe it or not, this is the little violin that I picked up when I rescued my sister when the boys burned the barn down. And I must tell you something else about this little violin. I was in a recital one night, and I was just playing my piece that I had practiced on beautifully, and all of a sudden the string broke. And land sakes, was that an embarrassment. Well, Ms. Usher just took this little violin back in the room and put a new string on, and I had to start again. And of course, when you put a new string on, it's always slipping. And it was out of tune, and I was off chord, and it was just a darn mess. But anyway, this is the little violin that Grandmother Sal gave me.
And the first was loud, but later realized, for the times they are a-changing. Come mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and
These are a few of the highlights of the early beginning of Pageland. We think this was a deeded by Mary A. Sowell, my daddy's mother, to the town of Pageland for Pearl Street. And the original Pearl Sowell signed it. And this is a picture of my Aunt Pearl, my dad's sister, from whom Pearl Street was named for. And of course I was named for her. Another outstanding piece of property was from the mother's side was the famous Blakeney Hotel that has many stories behind it, and it is recently being considered to have a bed and breakfast or something. We don't know what's going to happen to it, but it's been in process of changing hands for a long time. This Mr. Shearer taught school. He was originally from Michigan, and he wanted to get a grant and make something big out of the hotel, but he found out that an individual was unable to get a grant. So this has been up for grabs for a long time, and the Historic Society wanted to buy it so badly and make a, treasure out of it to remember, a museum more or less, but he wanted to charge us an outrageous amount of $65,000 when he only paid $2,000 for it. But Emma Jean, my cousin, didn't want it, and she was the only heir, so that's why I got it so cheap. Anyway, this is the beginning of Pearl Street. At one